Galeon's modern fleet is pretty huge. It actually spans 27 models across 5 product lines ranging from 30 to 80 feet in length. But what Galeon is particularly famous for is of course flybridge cruisers, and in the summer of 2023 it got a new one to shout about in the form of this, the new Galeon 560 Fly. Now my boss, Hugo, took a look at this boat back in September at the Cannes Yachting Festival where it was launched. That was alongside, of course, so rest assured we are going to take it out. But before we do that, I want to take a look at a couple of things we can't inspect while we're out on the water. And that, of course, starts with the back end. Now, this is a lovely big swim platform, capable of carrying a 500 kilo tender, anything up to about a 3.45 metre Williams. But in all honesty, you'd want something slightly smaller just so you can take proper advantage of these telescopic steps that extend down into the water when you drop the platform below the surface. And at the back end here, we also have a little seat. It doesn't take up much space, but it's big enough for a couple of people just to sit and face aft. So that's a very attractive touch too. And actually it's practical in other ways. We've got the water points just down in here, neatly tucked away on the starboard side. As you can see, we've got the shore power equally nicely tucked away on the port side. We've got a telescopic passerelle comes out of there, so good access to the cockpit. Nothing's getting in your way. And we also have a crew cabin beneath here that is a lot more practical than you might actually think. Now, the access point to this crew cabin is fantastic, achieved from the swim platform, as you can see, rather than through a little hatch in the cockpit. And that's a feature from a much larger boat, and a very welcome one. And as you can see, the space itself, well, it runs transverse, but the bed runs fore and aft. A single bed over here on the port side. And if I pop my feet right down at the bottom end, well, you can see we've got plenty of space here. I reckon there's space for a guy of up to about 6'6" in there, so it's very decent. Slightly dark over there because there are no windows, but there's a big transverse window up high for lots of natural light. We've also got access here to a good size of fridge, lots of lovely storage spaces, plus a little microwave around the corner, and a wet room with toilet, which is a very handy feature. Uses a sliding door to make the most of the space. And of course, some people on a boat this size, well, they won't want crew, but that's not a problem. Have it anyway, because if you're going swimming, if you're doing a bit of diving off the back, a bit of water sports, this is a great place to come in and change, to use as an additional day heads, to have a shower. And of course, if you're going cruising for an extended period, it's a brilliant spot just to chuck all your bulky baggage. Now I promise we will genuinely go for a drive. Last thing we check before we go out, we're just going to have a little look at the engine room. And you can access that directly from this crew cabin. In we go, past the microwave. And as you can see, though there's no standing headroom, space is pretty tremendous. I'll move forward between these engines to give you a bit of space to come in after me. You'll see here we've got a pair of Volvo Penta D13 900s. That's the most powerful engine option for this boat. You can have the 800s based on the same block if you prefer. And as you can see, this boat uses straight shafts in the traditional fashion. They exit the hull beneath that checker plate further aft, of course. We also have plenty of space in here for access to all your major servicing points. We've got an enormous generator on that aft bulkhead, and above that, an equally enormous calorifier, usefully elevated, again to make best use of this space. Now clearly this is a boat with a deck arrangement that's particularly generous, especially at that back end. There's a lot of heavy duty equipment back there, and it's a 27-ton boat, and as we've seen, it's got a couple of 900 horsepower diesel engines, so I'm not expecting fireworks at the helm, and it's not going to deliver any, I'm pretty certain of that. But in terms of the basic helm position, it's pretty decent, particularly for a flybridge cruiser. Now we've got the skipper here on the starboard side. We share single two-man bench here, so either you move it all forward or none of it. It's not independently adjustable, but it does shift a decent way forward, so you can get right up and intimate with your key touch points here, your throttles and your steering wheel. We got the tabs on the right hand side too, on its own little ledge there, which is nice. And we got plenty of space up here for a couple of 16-inch plotters, plus bow and stern thrusters down here, which is very useful indeed on a boat like this with significant windage. A little bit of switchgear, not a lot, because most of the stuff is done digitally these days. But we also have, as you'll see, a seakeeper. That's something I forgot to mention when I was down in the engine room. And that seakeeper is positioned, of course, bang in the centre, and it pretty much straddles the space between that crew cabin and the engine bay. I also forgot to mention the fuel tanks while I was down in that engine bay. We got a pair of 1100 litre tanks, so 2,200 litres in total, and that's very significant for a boat of this type. So saving 20% in reserve, about 1,760 litres, 1,800 litres to play with. We don't have fuel flow figures today, so we're going to kind of guesstimate the usable cruising range. But either way, let's get her up and on the plane and see how she goes. Now, the first thing you notice, and you don't notice this so much up on the flybridge, is the fact that we get a little bit of bow up attitude, and that's only to be expected. As I say, a lot of the weight is aft, so up comes that bow. We're approaching 18 knots now, 19, 20. Now if I just come a little off the throttles there and just drop those tabs a touch, you'll see that we flatten off nicely there. That's not too bad at all. Still a little bit of bow up attitude, and I can't actually see the horizon through those aft doors the way you can when you're sitting off the plane. Nonetheless, it's a decent sort of running attitude. And what's interesting here is the fact that if you want to turn a few corners and carve a few arcs, well, it doesn't much appreciate it if you throw the wheel over and try to carve hard round the corner. I'll show you exactly what I mean as soon as we get away from this boat on our port side. Here we go. So if I throw her over to starboard, there's a little bit of heel, but because I'm turning quite hard, we're starting to feel that weight. We were going 28 knots, we're down to 21, down to 20, and if you keep doing this, essentially what you're going to do is come off the plane, turn into a displacement boat, and have to get yourself back up on the plane and back up to pace. But if I now do that more sensitively, straighten up and get her back up and running, and we get ourselves up to sort of 27, 28 knots, and then we just ease round the same turn but allow her to stay on the plane. We're doing 29.5 knots now, and I'm taking it relatively easy with the turn, and we stay up there. We're still doing 29.5 knots. We're not getting bogged down. We're not operating like a displacement boat. And actually, in spite of the fact that we've got a very fulsome forward hull section, particularly with those kind of flared bow sections in this hull in classical kind of Galeon fashion, the ride over our fairly mountainous wakes is relatively soft. It's not bad at all. Now, as I say, in terms of fuel flow, we can't be accurate because we don't have those figures here with us today, but we've had a little look online. We've checked out the maximum fuel flow for these D13s, and it looks like about 160 litres per engine, so 320 litres in total. And as luck would have it, this boat is, well, it tops out at around about 32 knots. So at the top end, we're looking at 10 litres per nautical mile. And if we talk about those big fuel tanks, well, 1,800 litres, we've got 180 nautical mile range, very simple. Now, it's reasonable to expect that if you come down to cruising speeds, you'll be looking at closer to 7, 8, 9 litres per nautical mile, in which case you're looking at a range that extends right out towards 250 miles, and that's a very sensible sort of range for a boat of this kind. In terms of things I don't particularly like about this helm station, well, there's just a couple of things. Now, one of those is visibility. We've got a lovely big one-piece screen, but I'm sitting right up close to it, relatively speaking, and we've got big old mullions here, so they do kind of get in your line of sight. Now, if they'd put the helm position over in the centre, that would minimise that problem, but of course then it kind of traps your co-pilot, so I see why they've done what they've done. I'm also a big fan of an opening window on the port side, just so I can shout at people when we're coming alongside, when I need people to do various things with lines. So I'd like to see that integrated. But on the plus side, we have a good skipper's door right here on the starboard side. And in any case, I'm being a little overcritical because, as I say, this is a flybridge cruiser, so the vast majority of people will be helming it from up top. So that's exactly what we'll do right now. Now the upper helm, like the lower helm, is on the starboard side, which on the face of it doesn't make a tremendous amount of sense. I mean, ideally you'd want one on either side just so you could tailor your coming alongside manoeuvre to the particular marina in which you find yourself. That said, it's a pretty good station. Again, we've got a couple of 16-inch plotters, a compass on top, our bow and stern thrusters. I should point out that these are Sleipners, so they are proportionate in terms of the amount of thrust you get, and they're relatively quiet too, so they're not too upsetting for people in a marina. Again, throttles on the right hand directly next to your trim tabs. So it's a good sort of setup, and it's sociable too. We've got companion seating here. We've got 4 forward-facing seats plus an aft-facing bench there. So there's plenty of room, I would say, for a family of 5 or 6, no problem at all. So that in itself is a very attractive thing for family boaters when you just want to keep an eye on your kids on a long passage, make sure everybody's safe. But as regards the position of the helms, I should say there's no option for a third helm back there in the cockpit, but Galeon does offer a dockmate system as an option, so you could just stand with your remote in the cockpit space and just bring yourself alongside that way instead. So it's perfectly practical. Now let's get her up to speed, minding out for this police boat which is just rolling past us on the port side. I might just turn around and go the other way for a spell. Now up here we don't get the same degree of adjustability that you get down on that lower bench, because this bench, as you'll see if I just pull this over, integrates with the big dinette that's behind me. So adjustability really wouldn't work for it. So you just shift yourself forward on this bench, get yourself comfortable, and it is comfortable. You just don't get any lumber because that's way back here and you can't reach your gear. Nonetheless, as I say, very decent helm station. I will drop the bow just because I've been downstairs and I know it kind of works a little bit, just to flatten off the running attitude, and we'll spin ourselves around, head round to port. As I say, the heel is relatively modest, so actually this is a remarkably sedate feeling flybridge. Fantastic views of the bow. We're quite elevated. We're quite elevated in terms of our relationship with this wind deflector too. So we do get hit by the elements square in the face. Well, not just square in the face, but square in the chest as well. So this is a flybridge where you really feel like you're on a flybridge. Nonetheless, once you're aware of this boat's handling quirks, and that takes all of about 5 minutes to master, it's a perfectly relaxing boat to drive, particularly up top, because you have none of those visibility issues that we experience down below. The aft cockpit is not huge by the standards of 56 footers, but it's pretty well arranged in quite a traditional fashion. We've got a big L-shaped settee, big enough I'd say for 6 people or so, with a good size of plastic table, enough space here for freestanding furniture. And if you're not into plastic, they also do a wooden version, of course. We've also got this hatch here. If you don't need to get into the engine bay for anything major, just pop straight down there. We saw the ladder in the engine bay for that earlier. And on both sides we have little winches just to assist with your rope work, plus additional storage on that port side. And if we work our way up the starboard side now, well, you see that these side decks, because of the scale of these drop-down bulwarks, because of the scale of these terraces, well, look at that. How secure is that? It's up around my rib cage. Absolutely brilliant for family boating. And when we take a step up here, we've got integrated rails that keep you safe, so there's no break in that. We've also got these little filler points for your diesel and access points to your waste as well, all drained, tucked away beneath the decking. And this decking itself actually is very low maintenance. This is permateak, which of course is much easier to live with than natural teak, much more readily available too. And that's what enables us to get involved with those lovely shapes back aft, those curves on that swim platform. But let's head further forward, past the skipper's side door there, up another couple of steps to the foredeck, because we've seen in the past that Galeon takes its beam a long way forward, and it does exactly that again here. I reckon the widest part of the boat, round about here. Completely unbroken beam until this point when it eventually starts to taper a touch. But even then, because we've got an angular forepeak, it's still extremely broad even at this section. And what that buys us is this. We don't just get an island sunbed, we get a proper permanent lounge for up to 6 people as well, with cup holders, with permanent skylights, so you always get light down into the cabin below. And this is quite cool. So forgive me if I get this a little bit wrong, I'm a clumsy sort of fella, but the idea is that you can either raise a backrest to face aft towards that bench, or you can lift this backrest to face forward to make your sunbed more comfortable. Well, that operation is very simplistic. This one's slightly more complicated, but still very doable, I think. Let's have a look. Yeah, there we are. Slightly damp, but that is a really satisfying little solution. I like that very much indeed. It's all very well that these Galeons have massive foredecks, but it's the fact that they're able to use them so effectively that makes all the difference. Being part of the flybridge rather than the skydeck line, the upper deck offers some pretty useful facilities too. Now the steps up here are very decent indeed, relatively steep but easily navigable, and I like the fact that we have grab rails that fall easily to hand, but they're not just practical, they're also pretty stylish. They really worked hard on the style here, and it pays dividends. It feels like quite a cool boat. Now in terms of this flybridge, as I say, it's much bigger than you'd expect of the skydeck range. It's a proper full-size thing. It's not dropped down or shunted aft. It occupies the entire space up here, and that's used at the aft end for a sun deck beyond the remit of that hardtop, which incidentally is an integrated part of this deck. So the hardtop is not optional, it comes as part of the standard package and you have to have it. It makes sense then that it stops short so you get some proper sun at the aft end. And as standard, you get a couple of these sun loungers, but you can of course spec it in whatever way you like. They thought about putting some moulded furniture back here, but as you'll see, we've got plenty of that further forward. So I reckon this is a pretty good solution. And I also like the fact that we've got glass balustrades wrapping around here. It just opens up the space, makes it feel a little brighter, improves your views when you're lying down there at a low level. And what I also like is the galley space, and I'm going to call it a galley space rather than a wet bar because it occupies both sides and is particularly versatile. Now over here, this looks like a lid that should open. It isn't, it's a fixed lid, so this is a good sturdy grab rail. And the reason for that is that we've got an ice maker underneath and a bit of storage. But if you forego the ice maker, then you can lift that up and use that as nice deep storage trays as well. On the starboard side, I particularly like this as well. These are lifting lids, but they're designed to be grab handles as well, so they're fixed. You can't actually lift them until you release them with these little buttons, and then up they come. We get a sink over here. You can also opt for a sink on that port side. And over here, if I can find the button, there's our barbecue. Plus, that handiest of things up on a flybridge, a nice deep drained ice chest to keep your beers in. Additional storage under here as well, plus the fridge. So it really is a properly spec'd part of the boat. And the fact that it's bang in the centre makes it equally useful for the people aft as it is for the people forward. And talking of the people forward, as I step beneath the shade of this hardtop, well, this is really impressive. So as you can see, entirely symmetrical. And the fact that Bruce is now helming from down below means I can use this helm seat and integrate it properly. And what you'll see is we've got a pair of C-shaped dinettes, one on either side. But you can very simply fold these over, a bit more freestanding furniture, and create a colossal party space. Easily seat 12 people up here, perhaps the entire ship's company of 14. If you need to go fore and aft, just fold a table or climb over the seat. And when these tables are folded back, well again, grab rails everywhere you look. Now I know what you're thinking, and it's pretty well illustrated on a day like today. Beautiful sunny day, but I'm in the shade, it's a bit chilly. This is fixed, but there is an option for a retractable canvas sunroof, so you can also introduce a little bit of sunlight to your dinette as well, and that makes loads of sense to me. And finally, further forward, as I mentioned when I was at the helm, well, this is your companion seating. A two-man bench there, another two-man bench at the helm, and this little aft-facing bench as well, big enough for 3 people, another couple there, that's 5. Or if you want to get out of the blast from that wind, just nestle down in the lee of that screen, and I tell you, that is a lovely position if you can convince somebody else to helm and just have a doze over here on the port side. In any case, pleasant though this is not the most attractive recreational feature of this new Galeon 560. That is to be found on the main deck in the form of those two drop-down bulwarks. So let's fold those down right now and see exactly how effective they are. Now, it's all very well, isn't it, designers coming up with amazing designs that you then put on a boat, get them out on the water, and it doesn't quite work. Well, this absolutely works. For a start, the drop-down terrace is massive, massive in terms of its length. It actually overlaps the mouldings at the back, so you get an enormous additional side deck. It adds a metre to the beam. The glass panels, well, they're a treat when you walk about on it, even though it's got this inset door here. Well, it's super solid, really reassuring. And as for the bar itself, when you fold that out, sit yourself on here, it couldn't be better. You can twist that around so you can face further aft, actually chat to each other more naturally. Even then though, there's plenty of space for you to make your way fore and aft. Movement here is absolutely not a problem at all. And as I work my way round the back, well, there's not a lot in terms of accessories you can add to this, this port platform, or the starboard platform for that matter. There's no ladders for you to reboard, but of course we got this enormous high-low swim platform down below, so that takes care of that side of things. And actually, as we're making our way around to the starboard side, it's worth noting that the back end of the pilot house itself is not forgotten. We saw this kind of door on the 440 and it works absolutely beautifully. So we can fold this section out, release it here, slide it all the way across and use this as a simple door, or we can open up the entire space so the internal saloon and the external cockpit blend as one quite beautifully. It's very slick, that. And when we get round to the starboard side, well, of course this mirrors the platform we've just seen on the port side, but it's used differently and it's used very intelligently. I actually prefer this side, if anything. So we've got this huge glass panel that simply slides out of the way. It's actually more a kind of door than a window in many ways. And we've got this section here. Now, I thought they would hinge backwards to enable you to face out, but they don't. They hinge down and extend onto this side deck. The table does the same. And that creates a wonderful inside-outside dining space for up to 4 people right here on the starboard side. And again, movement around here is fantastic. Now, as I say, we see all kinds of clever, ingenious devices being drawn up by designers. They make their way onto the boats and somehow they just fail. But this is every bit as good as we imagined it was going to be. As you can see though, our brief spell with those terraces is at an end. We're back underway, so it's time to step back inside and take a look at what the saloon itself offers. Now, at the back end of this space, well, that's dominated by the galley, and it's a pretty impressive galley. If I step into it, it's quite intimate, quite wraparound, kind of orbits you as you stand here. And that's a particularly pleasant place to be when you've got the bar folded out on the port side, when you've got those tables and benches folded out on the starboard side and the back door's wide open. It's such a huge party space. You really feel part of things, even though you're kind of a workstation. It almost feels kind of like a catamaran kind of space. Such is the scale of the deck. In any case, in terms of the facilities here, where we've got loads of high-level storage, you'll see that all over this boat. Every cubic inch is really well used for storage and for anything else they can think of, frankly. And here, the storage, even though it's high level, there's sufficient clearance that as a 6-footer, I've still got a really good view of the horizon. I don't feel at all hemmed in. Now at the back end, we got a fridge on this particular test boat and a couple of freezers down below. But you can configure that in whatever way suits your lifestyle or your day out. We've also got this at the back end of the unit. This is optional. This is the optional dishwasher. Very handy if you're cruising for a long weekend or even longer. We've got an oven built in down here with a grill plus an induction hub on top and a very compact extractor above that. And I've got to say, I find all these finishes really quite attractive. They've been picked for a UK market, so they're quite understated. You can imagine it being very easy to resell this boat a few years down the line because it feels quite classical. But if you don't like this, Galeon offers a massive palette of different choices in terms of the woods and the flooring and the liners and everything else. So much so that they actually advise ignoring the swatches at the dealership and just go into the factory itself in Poland and investigating what you like. As I say, I quite like this though, and I also like this. Now, brilliant though these terraces are, when you close back these panels, you fear that it might make things feel a little bit hemmed in and uninspirational, but I like this a great deal. Usually, a galley would span both sides at the aft end of a saloon, but here we've got this seating, even when it's only halved like this and the backrests are up and facing inboard. It's a charming little spot. And further forward, well, things are equally sociable. We've got a huge wraparound C-shaped dinette on the port side with a table that drops into the space. So that could easily sleep another 2 people. We've got 3 cabins down below to sleep 6 more. That's 8 people. Plus, of course, if you opt for that crew cabin aft, another person. So this is a 56-footer that could feasibly sleep 9 people on board. And that is pretty impressive by any standards. Now, we also have this bench facing inboard. As I say, it's a very sociable setup. And a TV built into the back end here, so you can view it from that dinette. Just down the steps from that dinette in the saloon, we find ourselves in a supremely bright atrium lit by that rake screen above. And the organisation of this lower deck is very simple to understand. So ahead of us, we have the VIP cabin. On the starboard side, we have a twin that converts to a double. Here on the port side, we have the day heads that is also used as the ensuite for that VIP cabin. And further aft, occupying the full beam, we have the owner's cabin, of course, with his own ensuite. But we'll start off forward in the VIP cabin. Now, this is definitely one of those VIP cabins that could claim to be an owner's cabin. You step in here, and the first thing you get, of course, is massive hull windows. That is absolutely fantastic. And that's supplemented, of course, with these permanent skylights we talked about earlier. 3 of those right there, just to emit light down below. Never obscured by cushions, of course, because they don't form part of those sunbeds. And because this boat is so beamy, we don't have to raise the bed too much. It can sit quite deep, and we still get a good size of bed with loads and loads of headroom. And actually, I'll stand back up because you'll see that as you take a step up towards the bow on either side of the bed, I still have proper headroom. Maybe 6'3", 6'4", because of course the deck head steps up in tandem with that. So the ergonomics of this space are really lovely. The finish is pretty good too. I like the artistic kind of backlighting of these sort of vertical planks at the bed head. But you can, of course, as with the various fixtures and fittings, you can change this for a different design, and Galeon has a whole palette of potential designs for you to pick from. What else I like is this. Now, I enjoy the curves. That's very nice to see. And I like the fact that we've got a little dressing table, a little vanity unit here. But I also like this, because conventionally on most boats, they just leave you to sit on the edge of the bed, and that functions perfectly well. But this is better, isn't it? A dedicated chair swings out, a little stool, so you can actually attend to yourself in the morning and then swing it away. And if I move round to the starboard side, you'll see that we also have some pretty good storage too. Automatic lighting, loads of height for proper hanging storage, and it's lined too with an Alcantara style fabric, which feels quite luxurious, and it also just dampens down the noise a little bit. There's also a TV built into this aft bulkhead. Storage everywhere you look, and I like this too. These doors, you don't have conventional catches that stick out with bits of metal to catch you on the way past. These are magnetic, and they're combined with rubber seals around the door, so they fit really snugly and rattle free. Lovely touch, that. Now let's make our way into that starboard twin. Again, we have plenty of storage in there, lined, automatic lighting, phenomenal windows, just absolutely massive. And this twin very easily becomes a double if I can just operate this properly. Yeah, really simple. Slide that across, gives you a little companionway here inboard, and that reveals a little drawer, a little bit of storage, and a little bedside table. So it's not a huge guest twin, but headroom's great. Quality is good, versatility is good, views and light are fantastic. Now let's pop across to the port side now and take a look at that day heads. Now, the basic footprint is brilliant. We've got a proper separate shower with rain shower and additional fitting here. And as I say, if you find this kind of finish a little bit showy or ostentatious, don't worry, because there are plenty of options. We've also got a little seat down in here, which I particularly like, loads of space. And again, I don't mean to harp on about these windows, but look at that, look at the scale of it. Happily you've got blinds, individually operable for this section and for the shower, and plenty of space here for the loo, the sink and the mirror, again with lots of storage behind that mirror. And I particularly like this. I don't know if it's deliberate, but it's kind of reminiscent of a seashell. It looks super cool. More lovely curves, and again I have to say for the most part I very much like the way this test boat is fitted out. As we make our way aft past this washer dryer beneath the stairs, that in itself is a very good feature for long-term cruising, we find ourselves in the primary space. And good though that VIP cabin in the bow is, this is very clearly designated for the owner. It occupies the full beam and headroom is particularly generous. In fact, regularity of headroom is generous. This deck head doesn't dip at any point. So wherever you are in this cabin, whether you're 6 foot, 6'4", you feel like you're pretty well treated. There are no pinch points at all. In terms of the base layout, we've got a central bed running fore and aft here. Another really quite dramatically designed bed head. Again, there are options. And then let's split on both sides. On the port side, we've got the ensuite slightly further forward with a seating area next to the dressing table. And that makes plenty of sense. Lovely big window, but of course, because there's no ensuite on the starboard side, it's even bigger over there. We also get more of this. Lovely big cabinets, big cupboards, hanging storage, and that's symmetrical. It's mirrored on the starboard side. And over on the starboard side, well, this is your standard fit out. This is what you get if you say nothing. You get a big storage unit. And there are options here though. You can have a settee. You can have a fridge built in here so you can grab cold drinks from bed if you choose. That's not recommended particularly because the fridge will make noise and potentially stop you sleeping. But if it were me, I quite admire the setup on the port side. So I quite like a little central table with a cosy little chair, one on either side, so you could have a nice breakfast bar to take advantage of this colossal window on the starboard side. Right from the start, the whole point of this U560 was to take the ingenuity of the 500 and just give it some extra breathing space, and to take the prestige of the larger 640 and just make it more manageable to buy, to use, to own. Well, this boat, of course, achieves all of that. And no, it's not the best driver's boat in the world, but spec'd the right way and used the right way, this is Galeon at its very best.